James Gunn put the final nail in the coffin. He has killed Aquaman and Lost Kingdom in its cradle by declaring, quote, "Nothing is canon until Creature Commandos." Let's get into this here. Gunn recently made his declaration in response to a confused Threads user who asked him, "You said DC Studios movies and canon start with Superman Legacy. I and many others are still confused. Are the returning actors playing new versions of the same characters? Is this a J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah situation?" This is what Gunn said in response. He says, "Nothing is canon until Creature Commandos next year, a sort of aperitif." I'm probably saying that wrong. Basically, I had to look this up. I didn't know what it was, some kind of swanky term, but basically it's like an alcoholic beverage you drink before your meal, to the DCEU, and then a deeper dive into the universe of Superman Legacy after that. It's a very human drive to want to understand everything all the time, but I think it's okay to be confused on what's happening in the DCU since no one has seen anything from the DCU yet. Well, no, if you haven't seen anything yet, then you shouldn't be confused. People are confused because you made an announcement, said things are going to be reset in the Flash, said all these things are going to be connected. You said Blue Beetle was going to be, the actor was going to stay in it, but you weren't sure if the movie was in it. It's all very, very confusing things. You've made multiple contradictory comments. I'm not going to get into all of them in this video, but you can find them on the website. Covered it extensively. So I think this person definitely has a right to be confused, and it's mainly because of how you've been communicating to people about the DC universe. Nevertheless, he followed up in another post. He said, "And yes, some actors will be playing characters they played in other stories, and some plot points might be consistent with plot points from the dozens of films, shows, and animated projects that have come from DC in the past, but nothing is canon until Creature Commandos and Superman Legacy." He would then respond to a number of other inquiries. One person, Jacatron here, 57, asked, "I'm wondering, how does the Blue Beetle movie factor in at this point in time? In the past, you had said it was indeed in the new DCU, but some statements are conflicting. Will it have any relation to future projects, i.e. the Booster Gold show Wing?" So James Gunn said, "Zolo Mariduena will continue playing Blue Beetle in the DCU, as Viola Davis will Amanda Waller, and John Cena will Peacemaker." And to give Gunn credit here, he's kind of said that all at the same time, but again, it has been murky. He's saying that like Superman Legacy is the first DCU film, but Blue Beetle is the first DCU character. Again, that's like really confusing. No one really knows what that means. Clearly, that Blue Beetle movie was not connected to the DCU, and they're just going to continue as having Zolo play Blue Beetle in the DCU moving forward. But James Gunn never really truly communicated that, and I think he left it murky because he was indeed trying to salvage some of the box office that he'd absolutely destroyed in the announcement of the DCU slate back at the end of January, which we'll get into a little bit later on here. But he would also address another user here, Capital City MC. This person asked, "Seriously though, why should we invest time and effort in yet another shared universe? Just build on what's already there with slight course corrections as needed." James Gunn then responded, he said, "If you think of anything as, quote, investing time and effort, no matter what shared universe, you definitely shouldn't be." That doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, that's what like you should be thinking in terms of that. You're investing your time and effort. If it's something that is not worthy of it, then you shouldn't. You can spend your time and effort doing something else, right? Every story should be enjoyed and worth partaking in and of itself without its attachment to an outside world. If it feels like homework, screw it. Shared universes should add fun to the individual stories, not the other way around. The individual stories and characters are much more important to me than the connections between them. Then that begs the question, why even create a shared universe in the first place? Why not just create disparate individual stories like we had seen in the past from DC before, where we had things like Tim Burton's Batman, we had Christopher Nolan's Batman, you had the Joker movie. You just had different things that were kind of off doing themselves. You had all the Superman movies that obviously were their own thing. So why are you going to create a shared universe in the first place if this is your kind of vision for the shared universe? Like, what's the point of it, right? But I think the big takeaway here is Aquaman and Lost Kingdom is not connected to the DCU universe. That seems to be very clear and definitive now. The DC universe begins with Creature Commandos and Superman Legacy. And I think a lot of people have already figured this out. And I think this is just basically the last nail in the coffin for the Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom movie. It's going to be another movie that loses tens of millions, potentially over $100 million for Warner Brothers, as we've seen with these other three films. So just to kind of give you a recap, if you go back and look after James Gunn made these comments here, where he basically said The Flash resets the DCU universe, every single film that came out after that has absolutely lost tens of millions of dollars at the box office. Shazam! Fury of the Gods only grossed $132.1 million. It had a $125 million production budget. On the conservative end, that means it lost around $108 million if you factor in marketing costs and the revenue the theaters take, the split between the revenue and the studios. The Flash, it might have grossed $267.9 million, but it had an estimated production budget of $200 million according to the numbers. We have CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Company, reporting it was $220 million. And then you also have these other rumors out there that it cost well over $300 million. So that movie lost upwards of $139 million. And that's just looking at that $200 million production mark. And then most recently, Blue Beetle. Film has grossed $125.1 million so far. I think it's like 6 weeks now. It had a production budget of $120 million according to the numbers. That means it's lost around $105 million. And obviously, there's other production budget reporting out there. There's one report from Deadline that says it's $104 million. You have another report from, I think it's Variety, that's $125 million. But if you go with the $104 million, it's still $81 million. And then if you add up all three of those movies, it's $328 million, and that's taking the lowest number. So that's not taking the $105 million for Blue Beetle. That's taking that $81 million. So that's the most charitable look at this. $328 million, and I think Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is going to add to that. We could see DC losing $500 million on their DC films released just this year before we even get to see the DC universe with James Gunn. And I think I've said this kind of throughout the entire video here, but he has indeed killed this movie in the cradle. He did it back at the end of January, and he's just hammering home the last nail in the coffin right here when he's definitively declaring that this movie has nothing to do with his plans moving forward in the DC universe.
Subscribe for more.